Alright guys, we're back for another week of day trading, and coming into the week my main focus was really just applying last week's lessons, being patient and waiting for clean opportunities with a solid narrative behind them. And honestly, I do think that there was some good improvement, even though market was a little harsh at times, but that's just part of the game. Alright, so coming into the first day of the week, not gonna lie, today was one of those days where price moved perfectly, just without me in it. Price is looking a bit bullish with NWOG sitting above as a pretty clear target. We still have that hourly order block below price, which still hasn't been tapped yet, so there is potential for a deeper retrace later on. But the move that created this imbalance has strong volume behind it, so as long as that momentum holds, I'm expecting price to keep pushing higher for now. I'm still keeping in mind though, there are some higher time frame bearish imbalances sitting above, so I'm staying flexible in case we do push lower. And on the lower time frame, things were looking pretty bullish as well, with price respecting these imbalances below. Those were also formed of good volume, so a retest later on wouldn't surprise me, especially with these relative equal lows sitting there as a target. Since price was already close to NWOG though, my main expectation was for price to run to that level first before any bigger pullback, and I'm still keeping an open mind either way. Moving into the session, price started stalling out a little bit on the lower time frame, which made me think we might get another dip first. We did get a nice bullish SMT on the 1 minute though, so if price did run, at least I knew why, and at this point I was really just waiting for volume to step in. Then market open hit and price just exploded higher with volume, but unfortunately we didn't get the retest that I needed, so no entry for me there. It's still fine though, since macro timing and the 15-minute candle hadn't formed yet, so there was still opportunity later on. And price kept running and we swept the highs above NWOG, then started stalling out a bit, and we got a wick sweep forming on the 5 minute, so I started looking for a possible entry if price gave a clean retest into the 5-minute balance for internal manipulation. But price never gave that clean pullback and instead just started pushing higher again, and we did tap discount and started forming higher, and in hindsight that could have been an entry, but volume just didn't look that convincing to me, so I decided to stay out, and of course price immediately ran to the target after. Honestly, I'm not mad about today at all. I stayed patient and I didn't force anything and stuck to waiting for my conditions. That later setup was a bit discretionary, and while it did run, I'm fine with skipping it since volume didn't fully convince me at the time. So yeah, just starting off the week nice and calm, and sometimes the best trade is just staying out. Honestly, today was one of the best decisions I've made all week. Coming into the session, price was still looking pretty bullish overall. We're trending higher and reacting nicely to some balances, but something just fell off. Volume wasn't really there. On top of that, we were also retesting into some pretty large higher time frame bearish imbalances, which could explain why buyers aren't really stepping in. So I wanted to be cautious and wait for some proper confirmation. And dropping to the lower time frames, we did have confluences that supported the longs, but price itself kept respecting bearish pressure instead. So at this point, it was really just a patience game, waiting to see if buyers would actually show up before doing anything. And as the session went on, price action honestly just stayed messy. Volume was coming in more to the sell side, which completely went against my long idea. And after double checking the calendar, I also realized it was a no news Tuesday, which historically just hasn't been a great trading day for me anyways. So with price not looking clean and it already being a day I tend to struggle on, I decided to just call it and stay out. And honestly, I'm pretty happy with that decision. Not trading is sometimes the best trade you can take, and there was no reason to force something in unclear conditions, and protecting capital and mental energy is just as important as catching wins. So yeah, just a nice calm sell on hands day. We'll come back tomorrow where price hopefully provides us something cleaner to work with. Today's trade actually ended up going against my main bias, but it still ended up being a solid way to start the week. Looking at price coming into the session, we were still pretty bearish overall. We had a massive move lower overnight, and buying pressure since then has been pretty weak. At the same time though, we had just created a fresh hourly imbalance that hadn't been tapped yet, so I was expecting price to eventually retrace back into that level before continuing lower. So overall bias was bearish, but a pullback first made sense. And dropping lower, we had some bearish imbalances still sitting above price that hadn't been tapped yet, and since selling pressure wasn't extremely strong anymore, it felt like that price would retrace first before continuing down. So unless we saw heavy continuation selling, I was leaning towards a smaller counter trend long into that imbalance. Coming into the session, I was mainly stalking that retracement idea on the lower time frame since this was only meant to be a smaller move. Selling pressure kept slowing down, and after a couple 5-minute candles failed to push lower, it looked like the sellers were starting to get exhausted, and that's when I saw my opportunity and decided to take the long. And I got filled just above the 5-minute inverse fair value gap, which price respected pretty nicely. Price pushed quickly and we hit break even pretty pretty fast, but right after that we got hit with a sharp dump lower, which almost killed the move. Luckily, buyers stepped back in and we started pushing higher again, and learning from my recent trades, I decided to secure some partials since price was clearly struggling to break past the extension cleanly. And after that, I just let the runner go, but market open came in and smacked price straight down towards my break even. So overall, a partial win and a runner stop. And I actually liked the setup quite a bit. It was definitely more discretionary since my overall bias was still bearish, but the opportunity for a quick retracement was there and confirmation backed it up, so I wasn't scared to take the trade. And not a massive win, but I'm happy taking smaller, cleaner trades like this consistently, and honestly I'm just grateful to have opportunities like this in the first place. So yeah, nice clean to start to the trading week. Let's just see what the rest of the week can bring. Yeah, today's price action honestly caught me off guard, and funnily enough, the move of the day was the one I didn't even take. And coming into the session, price still looked pretty bearish overall. We had that strong displacement lower overnight into accumulation, and we had just formed a fresh hourly imbalance that I expected price to eventually retrace into. So overall, I was leaning more towards sells after a bit of a pullback, and dropping down lower things didn't actually look that clean. There were a lot of wick sweeps occurring, and even though structure was technically bearish, price didn't look that convincing to push lower. So if anything, it felt like buyers were slowly stepping in. I kept that in mind that a push higher could definitely happen first. Market open then hit and price immediately displaced higher. We got a clean 5-minute break forming in inverse fair value gap and even got a really nice retest, and price reacted well and pushed through the recent high. And honestly, that's where I should have entered, but I hesitated. The setup was missing a couple of confluences I usually like to see, and since this was already more discretionary, I didn't fully trust the move. And by the time I was ready to consider it, price was already running, so I just let it go. And of course, price kept pushing higher without me. One of those trades that you watch it play out exactly how you planned, just without you in it. And honestly, I'm not mad at the decision. Conditions weren't the cleanest, and forcing entries in messy markets usually does more harm than good. Sure, reading sentiment, you could argue buyers were getting control, but in the moment, sticking to patience felt like the better call. And sometimes protecting discipline matters more than catching every move. So yeah, just sitting on my hands again today, just staying patient and waiting for cleaner opportunities moving forward. Man, this was one of the most unfortunate trades I've had in a while. Everything lined up perfectly and it still did not work. Looking at the higher timeframes, buyers were clearly in control of the strong volume pushing price higher. We also had some unfilled 4-hour imbalances setting above price acting as clean targets and an hourly inverse backing up continuation. So overall, my bias was comfortably bullish. Lower timeframes were lining up really nicely too. We had clean confluences and good market sentiment, and a lot of wick rejections into the imbalances showing really weak selling pressure. Honestly, everything was just pointing towards longs, and right now I just needed to wait for my trading window. And coming into the session, price gave a solid retest into the lower time frame imbalances. The first rejection was a bit too aggressive for me, so I stayed patient and waited, and then price shift higher again, and the structure looked cleaner. From that confirmation, I finally got into the trade, and momentum going into the trade felt great. Weak selling, strong targets above, everything just made sense. And then price just smacked straight down. At first I wasn't too worried since that pullback was still within probability, but there was definitely a lack of follow through from buyers, and then we dumped again, and then price missed my stop by literally 1 pip. And right after that, price absolutely launches higher. Proper I'm him moment from price. Just without me in it. But honestly, I take this setup again every single time. Confluences, market sentiment, structure, everything aligned, and sometimes A+ setups just don't work out. I've definitely been in a bit of a rough patch lately compared to my usual performance, but I know that over time the stats balance out as long as the execution stays solid. And I can see improvements in my patience and decision making lately, so I know progress is still happening. And at this point, it's just about consistency and time. So yeah, I'm just going to keep on executing the plan, staying level-headed, and letting the results play out over time. Alright boys, that wraps up the whole week. I definitely think that there was improvement, especially with avoiding trades when conditions just weren't there instead of forcing setups. And there were still days like Thursday where in hindsight I could have probably taken the trade since structure was backing up the move, and that's becoming a bigger factor in my analysis now, but I'm not going to dwell on it too much. Every lesson just adds to the experience, and over time those are trades I won't hesitate on anymore. And at the end of the day, every trade I take is just another data point stacking towards long-term consistency, so I'm just going to keep on executing and pushing towards those bigger goals. And yeah, that's gonna do it for this week. So if you guys want to hang out, talk trades, or just chill, the Discord's always open. Everybody in there is super chill and just trying to improve together, so feel free to join if you guys are keen. And yeah, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.